Hi there, and welcome to Zelda's Horror. I will post paranormal true stories every week. Again, all stories are 100% true and are chosen as the scariest and most terrifying stories I have come across. Most stories are of my own experiences and are not fake or made up. I've also made my videos with a rainy background so as to help you fall asleep. Please enjoy these Wendigo and paranormal stories in the rain. Now, let's begin. True story. Number 1. The Wendigos. Told by James F. While driving down the road in the state of Arizona, me and my friend were on a business trip, and we were on a road with lots of land on one side of the road. As we were driving, we noticed something running straight across the road. It was running on all fours, and it was pitch black. I slammed on the brakes, and after it ran across the road, it stopped and turned around and looked right at us. It had a white face with human traits. It then turned back around and started running off into the woods. After we took off from that spot, we questioned what we saw and talked about it the rest of the way to our destination. After finishing up what we had to do, we headed back home. I dreaded going back through the same area because of what we saw. On the way back, my coworker friend was driving and I was in the passenger seat, asleep. Just then, my friend slammed on the brakes. I literally got jerked forward. Then, he slammed on the gas pedal, and we took off, going extremely fast. I asked him what happened, and he said he'll tell me once we get home. That it was nothing at all. I was very confused, but I went back to sleep. As soon as we got to my house, he asked to come inside. He came in and I asked him what really happened on the road. He said he didn't want to tell me because he knew I would have freaked out. He said as he was driving down the long stretch of road, he saw 5 people running on all fours chasing the car, coming out of the wooded area by the road. He said he slammed on the brakes to get a closer look at them, but he saw that they were not human. He said that's when he slammed on the gas pedal and took off. I was terrified when he told me this. It was really hard trying to fall asleep that night, but surprisingly, I did. In the middle of the night, I was awakened by a tapping and scratching at my bedroom window. I lived alone at that time, so it was truly terrifying knowing something was outside my window, and I was completely alone. I got my phone light on and slowly started walking towards my window. I slowly opened the curtain, and I saw the same black creature that was crawling on all fours with a white face. It had its face pressed up against my window. I ran back to bed, and that's when it started banging on the window. I called a friend over, who looked around my house and couldn't find anything. We did find scratch marks on my windowsill. This story is true, and if no one believes me, it's completely fine. I don't expect anyone to believe me, as long as I know I'm a witness to the paranormal, and I'm telling the truth. It's something I'll never forget. True paranormal story number 2. The Troll. 2 incidents happened in this true story. My mother Amelia was sleeping in her bedroom alone one morning, and she woke up with a girl standing in front of a mirror in her room. My mother said she can only see her back. She said She was brushing her hair slowly. My mother thought it was my daughter because at the time we were living with her. She said the girl didn't do anything. She just kept brushing her hair very slowly. Now my mother was confused because no one was allowed in my mother's room, especially when she was asleep. My mother asked her, "What are you doing?" The girl didn't answer. As soon as my mother raised her voice again and asked, "What are you doing in my room?" the girl slowly put the brush down and walked very slowly out of the room. This was the first paranormal occurrence. The second one was much, much worse. Again, in the early morning, about 2 weeks after that incident, my mother was awakened by someone laughing and giggling. She opened her eyes, and what she saw terrified her to the core. She was paralyzed from fear. There was a small girl with a troll-like face, laughing and dancing in front of her bed. The troll had a grin on its face, long black hair with huge eyes. My mother was so scared, yet she said a prayer out loud several times and said, "I'm not afraid." She closed her eyes, then opened them again. The troll-like girl was gone, vanished. These two stories my mother told me are very true and did indeed happen. I wanted to know more, but that's all she told me happened. Be careful that nothing is standing in front of your bed as you listen to these true stories. True paranormal story number 3, The Skinwalker. Me and my friends John and Adam went camping. As we were laying down, we heard something in the trees making noise. We waited about an hour or so, and the noises stopped. We wondered what it could be. I finished my last beer, and so did John. John said he needed to go use the restroom, so he got up and walked into the woods. He took a while, but after about 30 minutes or so, we figured something was wrong. We went looking for him. We kept calling out his name. I didn't know if he was playing a prank or what, so I got pretty upset and started yelling out angrily for him to come out and stop playing. We then got really concerned, but just then we looked down and found drops of blood. We started following the trail of blood drops, and we found him. He was facing the other way with his back faced towards us. He was standing up. He was covered in blood. We shouted his name, but he did not respond. I was gonna shout his name again until he actually turned towards us. We were in shock. His face was full of blood. We looked at him closer, and he had red eyes. His face didn't even quite look the same. I knew it wasn't him. He looked at us and said, "What's up, guys? Let's go for a walk," in his regular voice. Me and Adam turned around and ran away past our campsite. We ran right into my car. It was about half a mile from our tent. We were dripping sweat. I didn't know if it was chasing us. I could have sworn I heard thumping sounds right behind us as we were running away. I made it home, and when we got out of the car, I looked at the car and saw long scratch marks on the back of the car and on the bumper. This was more than 40 years ago. I also noticed one time that I saw John at a bar. It looked just like him. I didn't know what to think of it. This was a long time ago. I recently Googled it, and now I know it could have been a skinwalker. Adam, my best friend, never recovered from this incident. Paranormal true story number 4. The doppelganger. Again, for most people that do not know, I lived in a haunted house for more than 8 years. During this time, one of the most horrifying things occurred. My wife said she was leaving to get something to eat and went upstairs to call my daughter to come downstairs and put her shoes on so she could go with her. She went to the bathroom upstairs and then passed my daughter's room again. She noticed my daughter was still on her bed playing with her dolls. She told her to get downstairs and noticed that my daughter did not acknowledge her at all. So she raised her voice and told her to go downstairs, that she'll be waiting for her. So she went downstairs, but my daughter was already there standing by the door downstairs with her shoes on. She said, "Mommy, who were you talking to upstairs?" My wife got chills all over her body. She slowly walked up the stairs and peeked through the stairwells at my daughter's room and saw my daughter on her bed. What made her so terrified was that the girl on the bed not only was not my daughter, but she was staring directly at my wife with a straight face, showing no emotion. My wife then said she ran down the stairs and straight to the car with my real daughter in her arms and got in the car and took off. They didn't want to come back home till later when I got home from work. Paranormal story number 5. The aliens are up there. This happened about 15 years ago in southwest Houston in a nice neighborhood. I had a friend that lived down the same street as me. He worked for NASA. He had a pretty big family. I remember one time throwing a party down the street. It was kind of like a block party. And I remember we had all kinds of drinks and we had all kinds of fun. I'll just call him Jonathan for now. But one night when we were having this party, Jonathan got extremely drunk. As we were reclining in our chairs in the backyard, he was starting to ramble about aliens. Since he worked for NASA, he would talk all kinds of things about what he did at work, but nothing really out of the normal. He would just talk about physics and things like that, or how a rocket is made, things like that. But this time, he was extremely drunk, and he started pointing at the sky, and he showed us a star that was kind of bright. He said, "Do you see that star up there?" And I was like, yeah. Although I had been drinking, I still remember what he said. He said, "That star right there, there's alien beings on that star." He said they live there, and there's lots of them. That star is called Trochia, something like that. And he started talking about aliens and how he even worked at Area 51. He started saying things about how he met aliens there. He started calling them by different names. He said, "Do you see that star?" He said, "That's not a star, that's actually a civilization." And I didn't know whether or not to believe him. But I told him that I did believe him and that it was crazy, everything he was saying. He said that they can hear us talking, people, the government. So I threw it off as maybe he's just shit drunk. And he got shit-faced to the point to where he started talking about how the aliens are actually walking among us. Things like that. I don't know too much about what he talked about, but I do remember he passed out on the chair and his wife had to come get him. The following morning, when I got up, I cleaned up a lot of the mess that was left over from the party. And I wanted to see how he was doing, so I stepped outside and I kind of walked down the street, but I noticed his cars weren't there no more. I even got closer to his house and he didn't even have curtains hanging no more in the front of his house. Then his neighbor came out and I spoke to him, and he said when he woke up at 6, 7 in the morning that Jonathan wasn't there. His family, him, his dog, his belongings, everything was gone. I didn't tell his friend too much about the conversation I had with Jonathan, but I told him, isn't that kind of weird? And he said, yeah, that Jonathan actually lived in that same spot for about 6 years. To just up and vanish like that was kind of scary and creepy. Where he went, I don't know.
Something in my car. Hi, my name is Jason, and I moved to a trailer in the country in Colleen, Texas. I was miles away from any store, and I loved the privacy. It takes me 1 hour of driving through the woods to get home. It's super scary driving at night because it's pitch black. You can't even see your hands in front of your face. One night, everything I have ever feared about the woods came true. As I was in the middle of driving through the deep wooded area, on both sides of the road, my car went out. It started smoking and didn't drive anymore. I started to panic and grabbed my phone really quick, but there was no reception at all. It was about 2 a.m. and I was exhausted. I just sat there with the car turned off in the pitch dark. I turned off all the lights. I didn't want to be a sitting duck. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know when anyone would pass by and rescue me. So after about 30 minutes, I decided to lay down on the floor of the back seat. I was so scared, I felt like crying, but I didn't make a noise, not one sound. But after about 45 minutes, and I was about to fall asleep, I heard something walking to my car from the woods. I literally could hear my heart pounding out of my chest. I stayed as quiet as possible, yet I could hear something walking around my car in the pitch dark. I could see nothing. I just kept my eyes closed and laid motionless. I knew and hoped whatever it was that it could not see me hiding on the floor of the car. Then the worst thing that could ever happen happened. I heard the doorknob in the front driver door try to open. It pulled back and it was locked. Thank God. I then heard it walking to the back door of the car where my feet were. And also, that door handle was trying to open, yet it was locked. I felt my face get cold and I was going to pass out. I heard whatever it was start to walk around the trunk of the car to my head. The door then tried to open and the doorknob started to pull. But this time, the door completely opened. I laid completely still and I heard the car door open all the way. There I was, laying in the back of the floor, not moving at all, acting as I was dead or asleep. It was quiet, and I wanted to die. Then I felt breathing on my face and grunting. Whatever it was, It was staring right at me, and it knew I was there. It smelled like death or rotten egg. I began to cry with my eyes closed. I felt something grab my t-shirt and began pulling slowly. That's when I had no choice. I knew I had to do something. I started screaming and yelling, and I opened my eyes, yet I can only see the outline of something huge with horn-like antlers. I started kicking and punching. Then I finally fainted. I woke up in the daylight with all my doors open to my car and scratches on my back and face. I also felt really sick. It wasn't long before someone finally passed through. I got a ride out of there. I currently live in the city now, and I am currently trying to sell whatever land I had and my trailer. Please, if you take anything from this, do not move to the country if you are fearful of the pitch dark or the woods. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone. There is definitely something out there, some creature that is unknown. Please be safe. Story number 2, the black creature. In 2010, when I was 12, we took a road trip across the South. We stopped at a motel. In the middle of the night, I asked my older brother to go with me to get a drink from the vending machine. He hesitated for a while until I offered to buy him a drink also. So we went outside and walked to the side of the motel. We saw something black and tall run across the parking lot. We hurried up. On our way back, we were talking about how sucky the place was, until we both stopped completely in our tracks. Straight ahead, in a wooden area, there was a black creature-like thing with red eyes staring right at us. I started tapping my brother, and I told him to run. We ran as fast as we could down the parking lot. And as we were running, the creature was running right behind us. The noise of claws hitting the dirt echoed. We made it inside, and till this day, I will never forget what we saw. True story number 3, the Skinwalker. When I was 12, we went on a camping trip in the mountainous region of Washington. After setting up our tents, we circled around the fire and exchanged scary stories. I was the last to tell my story, and I told a story about a skinwalker. Now, I don't know if it's true when you speak of them or say stories. They say they haunt you, or they watch you, and they listen. Well, later that night, my friend who was sharing his tent with me kept moving and tossing and turning. I couldn't sleep, and I told him to stop moving. He said he heard something outside our tent and couldn't go to sleep. So I told him it was probably an animal or something, and screamed for it to scram really loud. Well, seconds after that, we heard a childlike voice say, "Growl," right next to our tent, as if trying to scare us. We both screamed. Then I heard a gunshot, unzipped my tent. I stuck my head out of the tent, and I saw the leader of our camp firing shots into the woods with his shotgun. As soon as he paused shooting, a wolf-like creature stepped out of the woods, and on its head were antler-like horns. It had red, fiery eyes. The camp leader started shooting again. This time, he must have hit the creature because it turned and ran back into the woods screaming. To this day, the only ones that saw that creature was me and our camp leader. The
fastest skinwalker. One night, as me and my girlfriend were driving down a dark, narrow road in West Texas, headed to our home we barely moved into. As we were going down the road, it was pitch black on both sides of the car. There were no street lights, and the ground was made of dirt and rocks. Something sounded loud, like it hit our car. It sounded like I hit something. I didn't know what it was, and immediately I stopped the car. My girlfriend told me to not get out of the car, but as curious as I am, I got out of the car, and I told her that it would be okay. As I stepped out, I heard something behind my car. I couldn't see it, and I didn't look back. It sounded as if something was messing with the trunk of my car. I hurried up, and I got back in the car and locked the doors. My girlfriend then turned towards me and asked me, "What did you see? What happened?" I just put the car in drive. But just before I took off, I looked in my rearview mirror and saw red, glowing eyes and horns with a dark face. I could not make out the face. I nailed the gas pedal and took off. My girlfriend looked back and started screaming, "Oh my God! Oh my God! We're gonna die!" I was going well over 100 miles an hour until I saw that same creature catching up to us through my rearview mirror. How was that possible? Just how? What could literally run that fast? Then it just disappeared. Gone. When we made it home, I looked at my car, and to my surprise, there was 3 long, deep claw marks embedded on the trunk of my car. When I looked at the front, the bumper was dented in with black slimy stuff on it. Now we only drive in the daylight, never at night. Please be careful when you're driving at night, especially around the woods. I promise you, this story is 100% real. The Dead Boy. This true story happened in the Philippines.
Father and his son. His son passed away due to complications to a certain disease that his son caught. He was later admitted to the hospital and didn't make it. They laid him in the coffin, and the father was really distraught. So during the funeral, he was very sad, and he was even crying, asking his son to come back to him. Please come back. Please. Please, just wake up one time for me. Well, during the funeral service, his son opened his eyes in front of everyone and sat up. And his exact words were, "I'm thirsty. Please give me some water." The father hurried up and gave him a glass of water. His son, who was about 3 years old, chugged the glass of water, smiled, handed the glass back to his father, closed his eyes, and laid right back down to death. The father was screaming. At first he was happy and rejoiced, but no one knew how this phenomenon could have happened. Was this malpractice? Was it a ghost? How did his son wake up after being dead for 2 days? The bell. This is a true story. This story is about a guy who lost his mother 10 years ago. It was in 1890 when they used to put bells on the graves. Because of malpractice, many people died without knowing if they were truly dead. The doctors didn't have a clue with most diseases. Even after they passed, somehow some were still alive, and they actually were buried alive. They would wake up in their coffin not knowing
what was happening. How we know this is the coffins were opened up and there were scratch marks with their nails embedded in the coffin and their mouth open. Jonathan, after his mother died, 10 years later, on the anniversary of her death, the bell was still there, and they never removed it. At midnight, when he went by on that anniversary to give her flowers, the bell rang. The bell was tied to her arm in the coffin. How could this be? He was wondering, how can the bell ring after 10 years of my mother being dead? He got up, frightened and panicked, didn't know what to do. He looked at the bell closer to see if it was maybe the wind. But no, not this time. The string pulled again, and he literally saw the bell ring again. Ding, ding. He knew that it was coming straight from the coffin. But again, how can this be if his mother passed away 10 years ago? Later on, when they opened up the coffin, they found that her remains were just a skeleton. And actually, instead of being tied around her wrist, it was around her hand. The Ouija board. It was a cold December night in 2003. It was a Saturday, and we organized a small gathering for my friend Olivia's birthday with our closest friends. Everything was going well in a pretty good atmosphere. There weren't very many people there. I would say about 20 people in total, but I remember around 2 o'clock in the morning, Anna, another friend of mine, suggested that Olivia open the gifts she had received, since only about 8 of us were left. While everybody was laughing, she opened them one by one until it was time to open Anna's gift that she had brought. When Olivia opened Anna's gift, it looked like a board game, and we all thought it was supposedly just a random board game. But no, it was actually a Ouija board. A Ouija board, supposedly, is when one makes contact with beings from beyond this realm. So most of us made a gesture of displeasure. But Anna, the one who bought the board game, told us to calm down, that she knew a lot about these things, and that everything would be fine, that not all spirits are bad. After some time, about half of the people decided to leave, and half of us were arguing that playing the Ouija board was a very foolish thing to do. I agreed with them, but my curiosity was too great. I thought to myself, how could it be possible to communicate with spirits through a simple board? It was around 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock in the morning when my friends placed the Ouija board on a small table. Everyone sat around it, and it was illuminated by some candles. Anna was very well prepared. Once again, they urged me to play, but I refused. I felt that I was already risking too much by just being there. So there was about 5 of us in total. Olivia, Sophia, Matt, Anna, and me. Matt actually spoke out and said he was going to just stay over as an observer, and made everyone promise that if anything strange happened, we would immediately stop the game. That actually made me feel a little bit safer when he said that. About 15 minutes passed and absolutely nothing happened. The planchette didn't even move. For those who don't know, the planchette is a small triangular piece that is placed on the board, and it indicates letter by letter what the entity is trying to say. It meant there was no spirit in contact with us, so for a moment there I was a little bit relieved. But surprisingly, after a few more minutes, it began to move. Everyone started asking questions. Some questions were about things that only we knew about, but the spirit answered them with great certainty. You can say everything was going well, but then something terrible happened. We asked about the cause of death of an acquaintance of ours, about whether there were other spirits besides him, and then right after that question, we asked whether or not it was a good or evil spirit.
The planchette moved toward yes when we asked if it was an evil spirit. Just then, suddenly, a door that was situated right behind us slammed shut. Later on, Sophia thought she heard someone call her name, but I certainly didn't hear anything. But what I am sure about is that the candle that I was holding started to shake. As a result, I dropped it on the floor. I tried to leave, and they tried to stop me. Anna told me that I couldn't just leave like that, as they had to say goodbye to the spirit first. But overcome with panic, I ignored their words. Everyone else stayed that I remember. I didn't hear from my friends for the next few days. Later on, I found out that things worsened. After I left, they told me that the spirit was asked its name, which it responded with a very strange and hard to pronounce name. I'm sorry that I can't tell you what it is, but not even they could remember it. They also told me that leaving there was the best thing I could have done by not being directly involved in the game. The risk I ran by leaving was lesser. As I mentioned, one of the most important rules of the Ouija is that you cannot leave the site until the entity allows you to go, and it says goodbye. As I understand it, that spirit was not allowing them to leave. Perhaps one of the strangest things is that no one noticed the things that others were perceiving. Matt explained he heard footsteps running towards him, but no one else noticed it. Also, in a really weird manner, Sophia started laughing hysterically while looking towards the patio, exactly through the door that had slammed a few moments before. She also collapsed to the floor. The rest affirmed they hadn't seen anything there. Olivia said she heard footsteps on the roof and some howling like that of an animal, and likewise no one else was aware of that. Anna clearly heard a scream in the distance and felt someone push her backwards, and from what I know, it was at that point when everyone ran out without properly ending the game. I think, as I did, that it was all just collective paranoia, and the perfect proof of that was that no one was aware of what the other was experiencing. But now, 25 years after that night, I truly believe everything that happened with my friends was merely not just coincidence. Because since that time, only two of us are alive. Matt, about a month later, began to suffer terrible headaches and a sudden weight loss. Then ultimately, he passed away. Doctors were unable to accurately diagnose an illness, and this terrified us all without communicating with each other. We all came to blame the Ouija board. Olivia was unalived by her boyfriend a few months later. It's really strange because he seemed to be a good person, and I don't know what could have happened between them. Also, from that day on, Sophia was not well mentally. She occasionally experienced bouts of laughter and hysteria, kind of like that night when she was playing with the Ouija board. And as for Anna and I, we share the same fate, as we started to experience the same mental torture. In my case, I began by hearing a voice calling me, and later I started to see shadows with strange shapes. Although some have humanoid forms, I must say that I have managed to get used to this over time. But there is something that's strange. There is one that particularly allows itself to be seen for longer. It appears to be a very tall man, I would say about 7 foot tall, and very thin. And I cannot see his arms, nor does he have any features. I've tried to record it, but I've never been successful. And I don't know if someone is listening to this story that may know why every time I see that man, My ears get plugged, and my muscles tense up, and I am overwhelmed with fear every time I see him. I can go days or even months without seeing him, but then, out of nowhere, when I least expect it, he pops up again. He has never tried to attack me or anything. He just stands there, looking at me strangely. I thank God that I enjoy good health, and I think I'll be fine. I haven't heard those voices calling me in the last few years. The only things that can be said to be wrong in my life are those lurking shadows that are very strange that pop up sometimes. As for Anna, she is not doing well at all. She experiences the same phenomena as I do. But intriguingly, she hears the man speaking in a strange language, and she doesn't know what he is saying at all. She says that she feels that it is definitely not something good. She has contacted and consulted with a couple of different priests, but not even they can bring comfort to her. She started having bone pain and went to many doctors. Some say she has cancer, while others believe it's just all in her head. The last time I visited her, she told me that she saw the man that I saw, but when she saw him, he had arms and he was holding up her wedding dress. She feels that thing will come for her pretty soon, and honestly, we are very scared. I don't know what will happen, but I ask that you can offer a prayer on behalf of her. I'm almost sure that after her, it will come for me next. However, I am aware that I must face the consequences. The only hope that I have, looking back, is that the 3 people that did leave early had prosperous, happy lives, and nothing happened to them. I am one of those that left early. True paranormal story number 2, the haunted apartment. Hi, I used to live in a townhouse in Rosenberg, Texas in the mid-1990s. We had an older man named Johnny who was the maintenance man, and he had a friend named Ted that would help him do maintenance work for the townhouses. So when people would move out, Johnny and Ted would have to clean up the apartment, fix it up, and get it ready for new occupants. Johnny would tell me that people would leave the most outrageous things behind. He claims that most people never even cleaned up the place when they left, leaving most of their valuables behind. Well, one day, Johnny the maintenance man told me that something horrible happened to him the night before when he spent the night in one of the apartments that he was cleaning out. He claims that he was alone in the apartment around 1 o'clock in the morning, and instead of driving back home, he decided to spend the night since there was so much work to be done. Ted, his friend that usually helps him, didn't come that night, so Johnny was alone. The electricity was off, but Johnny had his flashlight, and he said that he had some candles with him, and he made a small sleeping area on the carpet floor and laid down to sleep to try to get some rest before he had to wake up in a few hours to start work again. He claims that in the middle of the night, he was awoken by someone calling his name in the room. No one was in the room at the time. He thought it was his imagination and went back to sleep. He then woke up, and again, about an hour later, feeling sharp pain coming from his feet. When he moved the blanket from his feet, he saw that he had red marks on his feet, as if someone was scratching his feet. He said it was really painful, and he got up and walked around the room. He then heard a noise coming from the closet. That's when he opened the closet door, and to his surprise, there was a Ouija board on the top shelf. Whoever lived there cleaned out the whole apartment, but left the Ouija board behind. He got chills all over his body when he saw it, and quickly threw the board in the trash outside the apartment. He went back to sleep, and then was awoken a third time, feeling pain coming from his feet, as if something was punching the bottom of his feet. He jumped up and quickly opened the closet door to see if the board was still there, and to his surprise, Even after throwing the Ouija board away, the board was in the same original spot it was in, on the closet shelf. He got his keys as fast as he could, claiming that it felt as if he was being watched the whole time. His flashlight didn't work anymore for some reason, and he couldn't find his candles. He had to find his way in the dark out of the apartment. He claims while he was going down the stairs in the dark, he heard something right behind him, following him down the stairs. While he was driving away, he said he saw a cloaked black figure looking out the bedroom window that he was sleeping in. He said he never went back to that apartment, and he's always stayed away from Ouija boards. True paranormal story number 3, the haunted Needville house. In 2003, me and my wife got married and lived with my parents in Needville, Texas. We lived in a haunted house on Line Street. Many paranormal things in that house happened. For example, one day when my dad was alone washing dishes, he claims that my wife was standing in the hallway staring at him for about 5 minutes. When he looked up and acknowledged her and asked her if everything was okay, she just turned around and walked away. Since that encounter, many other things happened after that. One night, when me and my wife were asleep in the room, it was extremely cold, so we covered up the air condition vents. To our surprise, it got even colder, to where we could see our breath in the air. When we woke up the following morning, my wife had my jacket on her. I never put it on her, nor did she remember putting on a jacket. This was really confusing, but we completely tried to forget about it. But the really scariest incident is which occurred on a Saturday night around 3 o'clock in the morning, when my older brother came to spend the night on the living room floor because he had too much to drink that night and he didn't want to drive home. He claims while he was asleep on the floor, someone turned the ceiling fan on full blast. It began to rock side to side and make a loud noise. Despite this, and the fact that he had been drinking, he was able to fall asleep through it all. Then, about 10 to 15 minutes later, he claims he woke up and not only was a ceiling fan about to fall off the ceiling from going extremely fast, but when he tried to get up, something was holding his arms and his legs down. He couldn't get up, nor could he even move. The most that he said he could do was look around with his eyes. He tried to say God's name, and even that couldn't come out of his mouth. He was basically paralyzed and petrified. After about 2 minutes, he was then released. He got up and ran to my mother's room and told her what happened. After my mom walked around the living room praying out loud, my older brother decided to drive home. He was too traumatized to stay. The scariest part about everything is my room was right next to the living room area. After he left that night, me and my wife heard giggling and laughing coming from the living room. I mustered up the courage and I left my room and walked towards the living room, and I saw a black figure sitting on the sofa. The laughing stopped and the giggling, but I ran back to my room and locked the door. I was petrified. We eventually moved out of that house, but to this day you could still see a black figure on the front door window when you pass by that exact house in Needville, Texas. Thank you for listening to Master of Horror. If you like what you've heard, again, please like and subscribe so you can continue to get true paranormal scary stories in the rain. Alright, my friends, for now, good night. And don't forget to leave the nightlight on.